Well, it's lovely to be out on such a sunny evening in Edinburgh, but it's a shame that we have to be out tonight protesting against the two-child cap and the rate clause, well more than a year since Alison Thewlis, my colleague at Westminster, first spotted it in the small print of a Tory budget.
Very glad to see such a huge demonstration today and so many people still coming along 1 year after the rate clause came into force to show their opposition to this vile and despicable policy. The UK government have never been able to justify this policy, and we saw that this week with Esther McVeigh's pathetic attempts to say that the rate clause was somehow double support for women and that gives them some kind of chance to talk about the most appalling and disturbing experience of their life.
As you can see behind me, we're at the very beginning of the All Under One Banner rally. You can obviously hear the pipers behind me as events are about to kick off.
It's time to aim high, look resolutely outwards, and never, ever accept second best. Above all, it's time to believe that we can. We can build that better country we know is possible. And friends, we will.
If you enjoy watching our programmes, please help us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster by signing up to become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and we start with question number 1, Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its strategy is for tackling mental health issues in rural areas.
Minister Claire Hawkey.
Through the Mental Health Strategy 2017 to 2027, Action 12 outlines our commitment to supporting the development of the National Rural Mental Health Forum. The forum was established in 2017 and through Scottish Government funding helps people in rural areas maintain good mental health and well-being. The forum also develops connections between communities across rural Scotland to reflect the unique challenges presented by rural isolation. Membership has grown from 16 to over 60 organisations, with the forum meeting quarterly to discuss outcomes such as how people in rural communities can overcome barriers to accessing and seeking mental health support.
Claudia Beamish.
I thank the Minister for that encouraging answer, and I welcome Action Point 12. The forum's membership is indeed evidence of demand and need and is making a real difference in tackling mental ill health in the unique context of rural Scotland, where deprivation is hidden and around 1 million Scots live. I held an event for local employers recently in my region to highlight the support and help that the forum can give. And will the Minister continue to work with the forum throughout the lifetime of this government's mental health strategy?
Minister.
Well, government funding for the forum covers the financial year 2018 to 19, and the 2019-20 spending review process is ongoing. I certainly recognise the work of the forum under the chair of Jim Hume. I think they have done some fantastic work, and they're now the national network for driving change rurally.
Liam MacArthur.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The Minister will be aware of the closure of 2 wards at the Royal Cornhill Hospital in Aberdeenshire. This is giving rise to concerns in my own constituency about the capacity for dealing with patients for Orkney. Would you be able to investigate those concerns and provide some reassurances that there will indeed be the capacity to meet the needs of patients from the island?
Minister.
I'd like to assure the member that certainly the Scottish Government is aware of the ward closures and is working closely with NHS Grampian to ensure that there is capacity. However, if he would like to write to me with the specific concerns, I'd certainly be able to look into that and come back to him.
Annie Wills.
Thank you. Levels of depression in the agricultural sector are thought to be increasing and suicide rates in farmers are amongst the highest in any occupational group. It is understood that 1 agricultural worker a week takes their own life in the UK. What support is being offered to farmers and agricultural workers specifically when it comes to rural mental health?
Minister.
As I've already answered in my previous question to Claudia Beamish, there's the National Rural Mental Health Forum, which is certainly doing a lot of work with farmers and the farming community. I would expect that that work will continue. We have the National Suicide Prevention Action Plan, which will look at suicide prevention measures across the country, and they will also be looking obviously at specific occupations and reviewing suicides to see if there's lessons that we can learn there to prevent further suicides.
And Neil Findlay.
People in rural and urban areas in my region increasingly tell me that they can only access services when they're in desperation and when they're really in a crisis. So what does the Minister advise me to tell people who come to me seeking help but can't get it?
Minister.
This government prioritises mental health, and I think that's evidenced by the increased spending over the last few years. We spent £1 billion in mental health in 2017 to 18. I would encourage anyone who is in mental health crisis to approach their primary care team and to seek help there. There are also online telephone services that people in crisis can use via NHS 24 and breathing space.
Thank you. Question number 2, James Dornan.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what action it is taking to tackle sectarianism.
Cabinet Secretary Hamza Youssef.
We continue to work towards a sectarian-free Scotland by supporting a wide range of activity in formal and informal settings. This includes supporting work for organisations like Nil by Mouth, Sense Over Sectarianism and Supporters Direct Scotland, and the delivery of Scotland's first national education resource for tackling sectarianism, which is freely available to all. This work, of course, builds on a record investment of £13.5 million over the past 6 years, which supported 120 projects to deliver anti-sectarian education and activity across Scotland. We continue to see a positive impact in the communities that are benefiting from this work.
James Dornan.
Thank you. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Cabinet Secretary may be aware that on Tuesday evening last week I convened the first meeting of the cross-party group on combating sectarianism in Scottish society, and it was great to be joined by a number of fellow MSPs from the SNP, Scottish Conservatives and the Greens, as well as external members like the Church of Scotland, Nil by Mouth, Scottish Women's Convention, West of Scotland Regional Equality Council and others. I'm encouraged by the work of the Scottish Government in addressing sectarianism and welcome last week's publication of their final report on the legal definition of sectarianism. But will the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that the only way we will finally end sectarianism is as a society working together, and will he commit to working with the cross-party group in the future?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I will, of course, commit to work with the CPG in the future. Can I just take a moment to put on record the outstanding work that James Dornan has personally done in relation to tackling sectarianism. He has taken, for any of us that are on social media, if nothing else, has taken a huge amount of personal abuse for doing so, for standing up to sectarianism in Scotland. He should be commended for that, and he's done that and dealt with it with huge amounts of dignity as well. I'm really pleased that he's convened that cross-party group. I'm pleased to see that there is a cross-party consensus that we have to, of course, tackle this problem, and hopefully James Dornan and the group will get to the point of how is best to tackle this problem, and we, of the government, will work closely with them on that. We are, of course, working on legislation in terms of hate crime that will look at sectarianism. We'll look at whether or not to bring forward a statutory aggravator on sectarian prejudice. We'll keep an open mind to that as the consultation is currently underway. But wherever we can assist in relation to the law, but also, as he rightly points out, in terms of education, then I will be willing to look at any good ideas that come forward from the CPG or indeed from across the chamber.
Question number 3, Donald Cameron.
To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to improve access to air transport for disabled people who wish to travel to and from island communities.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
We continue to make airports across the Highlands and Islands accessible to people with reduced mobility through our subsidy of Highlands and Islands Airports Limited. HIAL and their airline customers provide services and equipment to enable people with reduced mobility to access air services. HIAL continually reviews its service provision to ensure that barriers to travel for people with reduced mobility are removed as far as possible.
Donald Cameron.
Can I thank him for that answer and draw his attention to the case of Fiona McKinnon, a resident of Tiree, who suffers from 2 serious health conditions, one of which requires her to fly to Glasgow to attend regular appointments at the Beatson. Due to her fluctuating weight, which comes as a result of her medication, she is sometimes deemed ineligible to fly. What action can the Cabinet Secretary take to ensure that Fiona can travel with dignity and to ensure that others in her situation can do so too?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I understand that HIAL have been engaged in this particular issue and with this particular individual in making flights to Glasgow, and the most up-to-date information I have regarding this particular issue is that the matter has been resolved by HIAL and the equipment which they have in Tiree to help to support this woman to make access to air services as and when is necessary. However, if the member would find it helpful, I'm more than happy for HIAL to contact him to provide further details on that, to give assurances to his constituent on this matter.
Question number 4, Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will rule out the delivery of personal independence payments and disability living allowance by the DWP under agency arrangements.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville.
People who rely on disability benefits have consistently told us that what matters most to them is that they are paid the right amount of money on time. So the most important consideration will be to ensure a safe and secure transition of these benefits from the DWP. The timetable and delivery schedule for disability benefits will be announced in the next year.
Mark Griffin.
I note the Cabinet Secretary's answer and reminder that disabled people are desperately keen to know how and when their benefits will be fully delivered by Scotland's new social security system. They want an end to the DWP's entire involvement in their disability benefits. Now, for carers, Government has agreed that the DWP should continue delivering carers allowance for the next 2 years with no changes to earning thresholds or study restrictions and payments and debts collected under Tory rules. I don't think that would be acceptable for disability benefits, and can the Cabinet Secretary confirm today there will be no DWP involvement in disability benefits?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I do appreciate Mark Griffin's challenge to the Government to do more and to do it faster. I think that's certainly something which I myself, as the Cabinet Secretary, bear very much in mind when I work through the programme for this. But I'm also conscious that members quite rightly tell the Government to learn lessons from past public sector programmes where we have taken things, or particularly around universal credit, the UK Government has taken things in an ill-advised fashion and at not the correct speed. So I'm conscious that we do, when we're delivering this programme, which is a joint programme with the DWP, have to have a realistic timetable and delivery mechanisms in place, and they will be announced next year, as I said. The pace will be quick around this. The Social Security Act was only passed earlier this year, and the overriding priority must and always will be safe and secure transition. The member raised carers' allowance supplement and the decisions we've taken around that. That was specifically done to ensure that we got money directly into the carers who have the lowest income, to ensure that that money was given to them quickly. That's the first step on a journey for the Scottish Government looking at carers and looking very seriously at issues in the future.
And Stuart Stevenson.
Can the Government confirm that it's the SNP Government who will maintain disability benefits, not cut them, will ensure they remain universal, not means-tested, will reform the disability benefit assessment process to ensure they work for service users, and that disability assessments will be carried out by the public sector in Social Security Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the member is quite right to point to all those commitments that the Government has made. We are committed to maintaining the level of disability benefits paid to individuals, and indeed to raise them annually by at least the rate of inflation. Protecting disability citizens also by ensuring that benefits continue to be non-means tested. We're involving people who receive those benefits in the design of our disability benefit system process, and that's why I know they want to ensure that the assessments are undertaken in-house by the Social Security Agency, ensuring that the DWP and indeed private sector agencies will no longer be involved in the assessment process.
Thank you. Question number 5, Monica Lennon.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government when the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Sport last met the Chief Executive and Chair of NHS Lanarkshire and what was discussed.
Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman.
Both ministers and Scottish Government officials meet regularly with the leadership of all our NHS boards, including NHS Lanarkshire, to discuss a range of matters. I chaired NHS Lanarkshire's annual review at the University Hospital in Haymarket on Friday the 2nd of November and went through a number of matters with both the Chair and Chief Exec at that time.
Monica Lennon.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her reply. Cole Thompson from East Kilbride is 6 years old. His mum, Lisa Quarrell, is desperately trying to find a cure for the crippling epileptic seizures that leave Cole paralysed and unable to speak. So far, Cole has not been prescribed the medicinal cannabis that could greatly help his condition. Cole has touched the hearts of thousands of people already, and a petition led by East Kilbride Community Trust is pushing for urgent action. Time is not on Cole's side. Will the Cabinet Secretary do everything she can to ensure that Cole gets the medicine that he needs?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful to Ms Lennon for her supplementary question, and I absolutely understand the issues that she is raising and the distress and upset that is caused to the family. The issue around the prescribing of medicinal cannabis is, of course, rests on the regulatory changes from the UK Government. They came into effect on the 1st of November, and we issued guidance to our health boards and practitioners very quickly at that time. I am happy to look further at this case and to speak with the member concerned around the particular questions that it raises and to see what further we can do as a Scottish Government and as a health service to assist in this matter.
Richard Lyle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In your discussions with NHS Lanarkshire Cabinet Secretary, can I welcome your decision to review the proposed new Monklands Hospital consultation sites? Can you advise the Chamber how long this review will take?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful for that supplementary question and indeed for the support for the decision that I took to review the process of identifying the options that should then be consulted on. And it is important that I make clear to the Chamber that I have expressed absolutely no opinion on the location. I have made it clear to the board and to I hope to the residents of the area concerned that this Government supports a replacement for the current Monklands Hospital. The issue that is being reviewed is the manner in which the choices of alternative locations are reached, the manner in which those choices are taken, and the manner in which the consultation is held in order to ensure that the maximum number of voices are heard before the board reaches a view on the recommendations it wishes to make to me for my decision. So that review, we are finalising now the specific terms of that and who will lead it, and I hope to be able to announce that very shortly. The review I expect to take a relatively short period of time because that is what it's looking at, and I am very conscious that we want, we and indeed the board, and I'm sure the residents of the area want to move relatively quickly here to reach a fully informed and genuinely considered and publicly consulted view on where should be the best location, the recommendations made to me for the best location for the new replacement hospital for Monklands. And I will announce that shortly in terms of the review's personnel, its remit and its timetable.
Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In NHS Lanarkshire, the absenteeism rate has climbed for the fourth year in a row from 4.7% to 5.7% against the Scottish Government target of 4%, a target that the SNP has never achieved. A rising workload due to staff shortages plays a huge part in this. The Cabinet Secretary recently announced an extra 2,600 nurse and midwifery places, which is, although very welcome, does not even cover the posts that are currently vacant. So does the Cabinet Secretary recognise that the workforce planning still falls short of what our NHS requires?
Cabinet Secretary.
For the 8th year in a row, I announced very recently an increase in nursing and midwifery places. I also announced the continuation of the Return to Practice programme, very successful practice programme for nurses returning to practice after some absence, and an increase in the pre-registration work that Open University Scotland undertakes. Again, another very successful programme. So we are working in terms of nursing and midwifery places to ensure that we are maintaining the increase in recruitment that is absolutely necessary. We are doing exactly the same thing in terms of medical undergraduates, looking also at advanced allied health professions, and a really important area of work, and again looking to ensure that we are recruiting and training in a range of different ways in order to widen access across all of those professions. Our workforce plan is one that is based on the best evidence that we have available. It is a plan that continues to be refined as that evidence improves. Our Safe Staffing Bill, which is currently the subject of discussion here in this Parliament, about to get to its stage 1 decision making, will assist us in providing further robust evidence in terms of our workforce planning. So I do not accept Mr Whittle's assertion, and I would make the point that it is this government in this country that has the most advanced workforce planning across the UK, and perhaps he could take some lessons on how we are doing matters further south.
Question number 6, Tom Mason.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the reports that in 13 locations in Aberdeen have illegal levels of nitrogen dioxide pollution.
Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
Aberdeen City Council has produced an action plan containing a number of measures to improve air quality. The Scottish Government is working closely with the Council as it implements the measures contained in the plan and is providing practical and financial assistance to both monitor air quality and support delivery of measures. And as announced in the 2017-18 programme for Government, the Council will establish a low-emission zone in Aberdeen by 2020.
Tom Mason.
May I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Can I also remind colleagues that I am a Aberdeen City Councillor. I know the Cabinet Secretary will be as worried as I am at these reports in the Press and Journal, given the potential deadly consequences of this level of pollution, which in some areas is as high as 48 micrograms of gas per cubic metre, well above the EAQD limit of 40. And according to research by the British Lung Foundation, one of the worst affected streets in the city, King Street, is home to the Aberdeen Community Health and Care Village, forcing patients to breathe this toxic air on the way to receive medical treatment. Can I ask, therefore, that what consideration the Scottish Government has given, either itself or through SEPA, to making additional support available to local authorities, so they can take action against this now, rather than simply waiting for the low emission zone in 2020?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as I indicated, the government is already discussing with the local authority and has provided funding over a number of years to do the kind of work that is necessary. I agree with the member that when we see results like this, it is a real concern, and there are definitely, particularly in urban areas, a number of very particular hotspots which create some significant difficulties. But work is ongoing with Aberdeen, and there are a number of things being taken to improve air quality. I indicated the air quality report already. We know that the AWPR will make a significant difference to air quality in Aberdeen, and there is a further citywide traffic count being proposed following the opening of the AWPR. So there is work going on, and of course there is an independently led review of the Clean Air for Scotland that I've only just announced, which will be taking place. And I hope for input from all to that, but equally we keep an eye on some of the specific problems and, as I indicated, speak directly to local councils about that.
Thank you very much, and that concludes general questions. We turn now to First Minister's questions. Question number 1 from Jackson Carlow.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The power to assert our position as an independent coastal state with full, unfettered access across our waters, or a plan to go back into the common fisheries policy with no controls at all. Which of these does the First Minister think is the best plan for our fishermen?
First Minister.
Well, what I think, Presiding Officer, is that the Tories raising fishing today is something of an early Christmas present in a political sense. Now, Jackson Carlow's attack on me on fishing appears to be because I continue to support membership of the European Union. The strange thing about that attack is that so does Jackson Carlow. And so does Ruth Davidson. Here's Ruth Davidson on the 1st of October 2018, just a few short weeks ago. Well, like I say, I voted to remain. I fought for remain. If there was another vote tomorrow, I would still vote remain. So on that issue, there is no difference, it would appear, between myself and the Scottish Conservatives. Where there is a difference is that SNP MPs on the 11th of December will vote against the Tory deal that sells out Scottish fishermen. Because we know that Tory pledges on fishing are not worth the paper they're written on. Let's have a look at them. The Tories said there would be annual negotiations rather than an overall agreement. The political declaration, though, commits to an overall agreement. The Tories said no link between access to waters and access to markets. The political declaration makes clear there will be such a link. And far from leaving the common fisheries policy behind, the EU statement makes clear that the new agreement will build on the common fisheries policy. Now, the Tories say, ignore all that, we'll get what we want at the end of the day. But the Tories have handed all of the leverage to the European Union, because unless the UK agrees to their rules in fishing, they will block a trade deal, and it takes just one country to do that. The truth of the matter is, and I'm delighted that Jackson Carlow has given me the opportunity today to highlight this, the Tories, just as they did on the UK's way into the European Union, are selling out Scottish fishermen on the way out.
Jackson Carlow.
What I actually gave the First Minister the opportunity to do was answer a question, but as is so often the case, it's clear that the First Minister reads out the answer to the question she would prefer was asked, rather than the question that is actually asked. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Fishermen's Federation has been absolutely clear. They say that under the Prime Minister's Brexit deal, the UK will be out of the CFP, and that the UK will become an independent coastal state. More than this, they confirmed just yesterday in an email to every member of this chamber, their backing for the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement and the political declaration. That's their position. Is the First Minister seriously trying to tell us that she knows more about fish than the Scottish Fishermen's Federation?
First Minister.
Well, Jackson Carlow wants to trade quotes. I'm happy to indulge him. Here's the Scottish Creel Fishermen's Federation. Well, I can only talk personally, having had these years behind me, and I really wouldn't trust the Tories as far as I could throw them. Whenever it comes to fishing, it's always been a sacrificial lamb. So is Jackson Carlaw saying that he knows more about fishing than the Scottish Creel Fishermen's Federation? The fact of the matter is, I know the Tories are desperate to spare their own blushes on this, but they are rewriting history. See, the commitment was never just... They don't like this, but they're going to hear it. The commitment was never just about being an independent coastal state. That's the bare minimum. What the Tories promised was annual negotiations. Now we know there's going to be an overall agreement. They promised no link between access to waters and access to markets. The political declaration makes clear that there will be that link. And of course, the statement issued by the European Union makes it clear that they are going to demand an arrangement that builds upon the common fisheries policy. So I say to Jackson Carlaw again, and no amount of bluff and bluster from him today will take away from this fact. The Scottish Tories, yet again, have sold out Scottish fishermen. Shame on them.
Jackson Carlaw.
Shame on you, concludes the First Minister. You know, if shame was a currency, the First Minister's pockets would be bursting. In fact, if shame was a currency, she might even be able to fill the black hole in her independence financial plans as well. Because what the First Minister is actually saying is she does know better than the Scottish Fishermen's Federation. And the reason the First Minister won't back the Scottish Fishermen's Federation position is because she can't. She's trapped by her own policy in Europe. The plain fact is that for all their posturing and pompous outrage, the SNP's policy is to rejoin the EU, and therefore, because there is no way around this, to rejoin the common fisheries policy. Here's what it says. Article 38.1 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union says that being a member of the European Union, as she wishes an independent Scotland to be, means you have to sign up to the common fisheries policy. There are no reviews, there is no reform, it's not a question of liking it, it's a question of lumping it. Isn't it simply deceiving people, First Minister, to pretend this is anything other than a fact?
First Minister.
I'm sorry, Jackson Carlaw really has to explain this a bit more simply to people, because he says that all of that flows from the fact that I want Scotland and indeed the UK to remain in the European Union. But again, I would say to him, so does he, or so he says. When Ruth Davidson says, if there was another vote tomorrow, I would still vote Remain, it seems to me that she wants Scotland still to be a member of the European Union. So if all of what Jackson Carlaw says flows from that, then it applies to Ruth Davidson as much as it applies to anybody else. Jackson Carlaw also talks about the Scottish Fishermen's Federation pledge and attacks me for somehow not signing it. The Prime Minister yesterday refused to sign the Scottish Fishermen's Federation pledge. But you see, we don't need to sign a pledge because we will do what matters. On the 11th of December, in that vote, on that deal that sells out Scottish fishermen, SNP MPs will vote against it. The question for Jackson Carlaw, are all these MPs that are going to sign that pledge, will they vote against that deal or not? Yes or no?
Jackson Carlaw.
The First Minister's advisers have given her a thick folder of answers to questions I haven't asked. I didn't mention any pledge to her. But since she asks, the Prime Minister did the deal that is going to deliver the pledge. So let's just sum up the SNP's position. They accuse Theresa May of selling out and fishing, but it's them who would drag us straight back into the CFP. They demand a renegotiation. With whom? The Chancellor of Germany, the Chancellor of Austria, the Prime Minister of France, the President of the EU, the President of the European Council, the EU's lead negotiator, the Taoiseach of the Republic of Ireland, and even Guy Verhofstadt, together with every other European leader, says this is it. This is the only deal on the table. They say, and I say, back a deal that delivers an orderly exit, protects jobs and delivers more control of our waters than we've had for half a century. She says, vote down the deal, meaning more chaos, more upheaval, and all in the hope that it will deliver her obsession with a second independence referendum. That's not in Scotland's interests. That is not standing up for Scotland.
First Minister.
You know, there's something starting to become very clear at First Minister's questions, and that is the redder Jackson Carlaw's face gets. The more he points wildly across the chamber, the more trouble he is in. You know, he asked me to support a deal that is bad for Scotland and bad for the UK, when the Prime Minister right now can't even persuade her own party to back that deal. That is the reality. Well, the SNP will continue to do what the SNP always does. We will stand up. We will stand up for Scotland. This deal will take Scotland out of the European Union against our will. It will take us out of the single market against our economic interests. It will put us at a potential competitive disadvantage with Northern Ireland, and into the bargain, it will sell out Scottish fishermen. And all along, yes, I have to say to Jackson Carlow, he talks about the SNP using Brexit to advance the case for independence. Well, let me say to him, Brexit does that all by itself. It doesn't need any help from the SNP. And of course that line, that threadbare line, is just a device for the Tories, because the opposite is true. They're exploiting independence to avoid hard questions on Brexit. It will not wash. People see right through it, and increasingly they're seeing right through Jackson Carlow and all of his Tory cronies as well.
Question number 2, Richard Leonard.
Presiding Officer, this time last week, the First Minister stood up in this chamber and claimed that she had given a very fair settlement to local government. Today, the Accounts Commission reports that funding for councils was cut in real terms by £220 million in the last year. They also say that, and I quote, funding from the Scottish Government to local government decreased at a faster rate, 6.92%, than the Scottish Government revenue budget at 1.65%. That's taking Tory austerity and quadrupling it. First Minister, what's fair about that?
First Minister.
Well, the Accounts Commission report published this morning, as I'm sure Richard Leonard knows, is for financial year 2017-18. We're currently in financial year 2018-19, and in this financial year, the Finance Minister in the budget earlier this year delivered a real terms increase in local authority revenue budgets. That is ensuring that local government can protect frontline services, and of course he managed that against a backdrop of massive cuts to the Scottish Government budget imposed by the Tories at Westminster. Richard Leonard would have more credibility on these issues if he didn't continue to back a situation that allows Tory governments at Westminster to cut the budget of this Parliament.
Richard Leonard.
Well, let me go back to last week, because last week, at the same time as the First Minister was telling this chamber that councils get a fair deal, letters were being dispatched to parents across Falkirk from head teachers, warning them of unprecedented cuts, including cuts to support staff. Catherine Snedden of Bowness received one such letter. Her son Lewis is 10 years old. He has a learning disability and epilepsy. Yesterday, Catherine told me, year in, year out, we brace ourselves for cuts to his support network. Take that away from him and other children who need the ACN support packages, and our children decline in physical and mental health alongside their medical issues. First Minister, are you seriously saying to the Snedden family that this is fair?
First Minister.
Well, as Richard Leonard will be aware, or certainly should be aware, the leader of Falkirk Council has since issued a statement apologising for the misleading impression given by those letters and given assurances about education services in Falkirk. And I would hope that Richard Leonard would accept that and also indeed welcome that. In terms of education funding overall, he wanted to quote the Accounts Commission report at me earlier on. What he will read in that report, page 17 of it, and again this is 2017-18, education expenditure increased by 3.2%, 1.5% in real terms. That was last year. In this year, local authorities have set education budgets that are at 3.8% higher than the budgets they set in the previous year. That's a 2.3% real terms increase. And since the SNP came to office, total revenue spending on schools has risen by almost £500 million, which is over 10%. But just to go back to Falkirk briefly, and Richard Leonard might want to reflect on this point, one of the issues that Falkirk Council faces is the cost of Labour's schools' PFI schemes. Labour, Richard Leonard won't like to hear this, I know, but I think it's good that he does. In 1998, Labour signed a PFI deal for schools that had a capital value of £65 million, but the total cost to the taxpayer is going to be £314 million. That amounts to a cost to the taxpayer of £13.3 million a year. I think Labour should be apologising for that.
Richard Leonard.
Presiding Officer, the Audit Commission report says Scottish Government revenue funding to councils reduced by 2.3% in real terms in 2017-18. The financial outlook is for reductions in Scottish Government revenue funding to councils. And let's be clear about this, Falkirk is an SNP-run council. These council cuts are made by an SNP government in Edinburgh. And it has reached the point where head teachers in schools across Falkirk are writing to parents to tell them that this so-called fair settlement means swingeing cuts. And the result is that vulnerable children like Lewis and families like the Sneddons face the stress of cuts to the services and the support that they need. First Minister, where is the fairness in that? Isn't Lewis entitled to realise his potential? Don't children like him deserve to receive the education that they need? When will you stop imposing austerity on Scotland's children and start investing instead on Scotland's local services?
First Minister.
Falkirk Council in this financial year set an education budget of £158 million. For Richard Leonard's information, that represented an increase of £8 million on the previous year. As I said earlier on, the Accounts Commission that he likes to quote at me when it suits him on education expenditure said in 2017-18 the expenditure had increased by 1.5% in real terms. We know that in this year spending on schools has increased, and we know that under the SNP overall spending on schools in revenue terms has increased by 10.3%, and all of that in spite of the swingeing cuts being imposed on the Scottish Government's budget by Westminster. And again, I would say what I said earlier on, Richard Leonard would have more credibility on these issues if he didn't continue to support a situation where Tory governments at Westminster were allowed to impose cuts on the budget of this Parliament. When he changes his tune on that, people might be more prepared to listen to him on other matters.
We have a number of constituency supplementaries. The first from Shona Robertson.
Can I ask the First Minister whether she can update Parliament on progress being made in securing a future for Michelin in Dundee in the light of the recent meeting between Derek Mackay and the Michelin executives?
First Minister.
Well, can I thank Shona Robertson for raising this important question. The Scottish Government remains focused on securing the best positive outcome for the Michelin Dundee site and its workers. The Economy Secretary had a very productive meeting with Michelin senior executives last Friday, where we presented propositions relating to the future of the site and its workforce in Dundee. The Finance Secretary will convene the third meeting of the Michelin Dundee Action Group tomorrow morning, where he will update them on Michelin's response to the proposition and the next steps. Once the Action Group, including representatives of the workforce, have been informed of the outcome of these discussions, the Cabinet Secretary will of course update local members. We are working with trade unions, Dundee City Council, the UK Government and right across political parties, including with local MSPs, to achieve the best possible outcome for the Michelin site and all of its workers.
Annie Wells, to be followed by Anas Sarwar. Annie Wells.
Thank you. The closure of Cowlaire's decontamination unit in Springburn has led to the cancellation of over 700 operations across hospitals in Glasgow, some of which have been major. In the papers this week, a whistleblower stated that had this closure occurred simultaneously with a large-scale incident, hospitals would not have been able to cope. The unit has reopened on a phased basis only, but can the First Minister assure me that patients will receive alternative arrangements as soon as possible and outline what action will be taken to prevent this situation from happening again?
First Minister.
Well, yes, I can give that assurance. Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board are already working hard to ensure that patients whose operations were cancelled as a result of this closure get alternative arrangements as quickly as possible. This was a very regrettable situation, but steps were taken as quickly as possible to rectify it. As the member said, Cowlairs is now open again. It opened again on Tuesday, and all appropriate steps will be taken to ensure that a situation like this is never allowed to recur.
And the last hour.
Presiding Officer, at a time when hate is on the rise, we got some hope. This week saw the Muslim and Jewish community come together to sign a landmark joint communique to call out and challenge Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in Scotland. Muslim and Jewish women born in Scotland together telling how they've been called traitors, been spat at, told to go home, and how they're scared of travelling on Scotland's public transport system. And this in the same week that we saw the horrific video of the young Syrian boy being racially abused and assaulted at his school in Huddersfield. Silence is no longer an option in the face of such hate. So does the First Minister agree that we can't leave the fight against Islamophobia to the Muslim community, that we can't leave the fight against anti-Semitism to the Jewish community, and actually that we can't leave the fight against all forms of prejudice and hate to any individual community, and that it must be a fight for all of us?
First Minister.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I would congratulate the Muslim and Jewish communities for the actions they have taken this week, and I would say that the actions of our Muslim and Jewish communities in doing what they have done this week are a better representation of Scotland than those who indulge in hate crime. I absolutely agree there is no place for silence. None of us should be bystanders when it comes to tackling and calling out hate crime. There's an obligation on all of us, and I say very clearly but very strongly that an attack on any Muslim, any Jew, any member of any minority community should be seen as an attack on all of us, and we should have solidarity and stand shoulder to shoulder at all time. And I say that as First Minister, and I hope I'm joined in that sentiment by every single member of the Chamber.
Question number 3, Willie Rennie.
I am concerned by the First Minister's plan to compromise with Theresa May. Cathy Newman from Channel 4 tweeted last night that the First Minister told her she'd back the Norway option if the Prime Minister put it on the table. But the Norway option takes us out of Europe. It gives us no say in Europe and will damage our economy. So can I plead with the First Minister not to wobble, to stand strong and oppose all and every kind of Brexit?
First Minister.
Well, sometimes I think Willie Rennie must have been asleep over the last 2 years when the rest of us have actually been battling on this issue. So let me set out for him again, and I'll try to do it in very simple terms, what my position is and what the position of the SNP and the Scottish Government is. Our preference, our strong overriding preference, is to stay members of the European Union. That's why, as I've said in this chamber to Willie Rennie previously, we will back a second vote to allow people to choose to stay in the European Union, and we very much hope that that proposition can command a majority in the House of Commons, and SNP MPs will be part of putting that majority together. But if it can't command a majority, and I hope it can, as we've said for the last 2 years, we would favour a compromise option of staying in the Single Market and Customs Union, because that's better than coming out of the Single Market and Customs Union and would be the least damaging option for our economy. It's not our first preference, but as a compromise, it is better than the alternatives that are on the table. So I hope that is crystal clear for Willie Rennie. And I would simply say to Willie Rennie, instead of constantly trying to attack the SNP on this issue, he might one day just think about lifting a finger to try to persuade Labour to back a second vote. Because if he can do that, then we will be able to put that majority together, and we can give people across the UK the opportunity to stay in the EU, and of course the people of Scotland the opportunity to express that preference for a second time.
Willie Rennie.
this is First Minister's questions, I want to remind her. So the First Minister is opposed to Brexit, but is prepared to back it too. Just yesterday, and this is important, just yesterday the Treasury told us that every kind of Brexit would damage the economy. So when jobs and businesses are at stake, I don't understand why the First Minister is prepared to accept this. The UK government is on the ropes. Previous loyalists are opposing the Prime Minister. We finally have a chance of stopping Brexit. This is not the time to accept any new kind of Brexit. I was pleased that she told 700,000 people on the streets of London that she was committed to stopping Brexit dead in its tracks. So how could she look those people in the eye if she ends up backing any form of Brexit?
First Minister.
Do you know, I'll be corrected if I'm wrong here, but I don't think so. I'm sure I read in the newspapers the other day that there is actually a Liberal Democrat MP in the House of Commons who's going to vote for Theresa May's deal. There's not any SNP MPs going to do that. So let me try and make it. I fear that Willie Rennie is starting to make himself look just a little bit silly on this question. The SNP opposes Brexit. We want Scotland and the UK to remain in the EU. We will back a second vote to give people across the UK the opportunity to choose to stay in the EU. But if we can't persuade, or Willie Rennie can't persuade Labour to come behind that, and that simply cannot command a majority, I hope it can. But if it cannot, not for the want of trying on the part of the SNP or even on the part of Willie Rennie, then it would be irresponsible not to look at the next best compromise that protected jobs and the economy. So that is the position of the Scottish Government. It's the position of the SNP. The other thing that Willie Rennie never manages to explain, of course, is that how can he justify seeing Scotland taken out of the European Union against our will? Because if there is a second vote and we get the same result all over again, which of course we hope wouldn't happen, the fact of the matter is Scotland would be no better off. So the real question is, will Willie Rennie stand up in that second vote? If Scotland votes again to remain, will Willie Rennie back all options, including independence, to make sure that Scotland can remain in the EU?
Thank you. We've got some interest in asking some further supplementaries. I would encourage members to be succinct and answers similarly. John Mason to be followed by Rachel Hamilton. John Mason.
Thank you for that. The First Minister may be aware that yesterday was Red Wednesday, when many churches were thinking of Christians who are suffering for their faith around the world. Is the First Minister able to raise with the UK or Pakistani governments the case of Asia Bibi and the Christian minority in Pakistan who are not afforded equal rights in that country?
First Minister.
Well, like many people, I am absolutely appalled by Asia Bibi's case and by the continued reticence of the international community in offering her asylum now that she has been released from prison. The Scottish Government strongly condemns the persecution of minorities, including the targeting of innocent people based on their beliefs. I share John Mason's concerns about religious intolerance and misuse of the blasphemy laws, and urge the Government of Pakistan to protect and guarantee the fundamental rights of all its citizens. The Scottish Government has repeatedly raised concerns over these issues directly with the UK Government and the Government of Pakistan, and we will continue to do so. We also strongly support international processes such as UN scrutiny of the record of individual member states.
Rachel Hamilton to be followed by Neil Findlay.
Thank you. First Minister, on Saturday, many small independent shops up and down our high streets across Scotland will take part in Small Business Saturday, such as Swan's Shoe Shop and the Tony Huggins Haig Gallery in Kelso. However, we hear today that the number of Scottish retailers going bust is on the rise, according to research by French Duncan. And amongst other cost pressures, rising business rates are being blamed. When will the First Minister realise that her government's high tax agenda is punishing our high streets and take urgent action to support Scotland's retailers?
First Minister.
Well, can I firstly say that I fully support Small Business Saturday. To celebrate that, I'll be visiting a small business in my own constituency, a small business called Category is Books, an LGBTI bookshop that's recently opened in my constituency, and I hope members will take the opportunity to support small businesses across the country. I have to say, though, it's a bit rich to have the member stand up here and talk about business rates. It's this government that introduced the small business bonus. benefiting many small businesses across the country. It's this government that continues to support the small business bonus, and of course in Scotland, including the small business bonus but many other reliefs, we have the best package of business rates relief of any country in the UK. I think Rachel Hamilton actually should support and welcome that.
Neil Findlay.
This week, Panorama exposed very serious failings in the regulation and testing of medical devices and implants. This is a global issue with dozens and dozens of countries affected. It's very clear that the system in the UK, the EU and indeed across the world is not fit for purpose. So as a positive step, will the Scottish Government now introduce a register of all implants?
First Minister.
But we are happy to give consideration to anything that lies within our power. Of course, as the member is aware, the regulation of these devices is a reserved matter. Responsibility lies with the Medical and Healthcare Regulatory Authority, and we have written to them on, I think, more than one occasion asking for them to take action. But as we have done with mesh implants, we will continue to look at what we can do within our own powers, and I'll ask the Health Secretary to look into the specific suggestion and write to the member in due course.
And Sandra White.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, it was reported this week that the Ministry of Defence are paying over 200 civilian staff in Scotland less than the real living wage. Will the First Minister join with me and many others in calling for a real living wage and for the powers to be implemented to be devolved to this Parliament?
First Minister.
Yes, I would echo that call. I think the MOD and all government agencies should pay the real living wage. The Scottish Government is a real living wage employer. Of course, Scotland has a higher proportion of workers paid the real living wage than any other UK nation, but we recognise there is still work to do. And I do look forward to the day, and I hope we can persuade others across the Chamber to support this, that employment legislation is devolved to this Parliament so that we can take the action that we consider necessary to ensure that fair work is something that all workers get.
Question number 4, Christine Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister whether the Scottish Government will ban the use of dog shock collars.
First Minister.
Well, as the Cabinet Secretary for the Environment announced in January of this year, we have introduced guidance which was widely accepted and reported at the time as being an effective ban on the use of electric dog collars as training aids. This is not a legislative ban on the use of such collars and was never intended to be, but it is intended to avoid the misuse of these collars and ultimately prevent unnecessary suffering by dogs. I appreciate that some members think we should go further. Equally, I understand that some people think we've already gone too far, but the Cabinet Secretary committed to issuing the guidance, and that is what we have done. She also committed, however, to review the effectiveness of the guidance after 12 months and consider if any further action is required, and that is exactly what we will do.
Christine Graham.
Thank you, First Minister, for answer. Unfortunately, what the Cabinet Secretary said in January, and I quote, "I have decided to take steps to effectively and promptly ban their use in Scotland." Of course, that's not what happened. As the First Minister said, guidance was issued. However, many animal welfare organisations now, such as the Dogs Trust, Kennel Club, SSPC and people like myself, want a straightforward ban, as there is in Wales. With no ban, can the First Minister tell me how effective is that guidance? And can the First Minister advise if there has been any reduction in usage?
First Minister.
Can I thank Christine Graham for her question? During the Parliament's debate on this matter back in January, and indeed during discussions with stakeholders on the wording, it was clearly recognised that the guidance would be advisory. The Kennel Club said at the time, and I'm quoting, that it welcomes the Scottish Government's effective ban on shock training devices, and that, quote, strict guidance has been published which provides advice on training methods and training aids for dogs. The guidance was only recently published on the 15th of October, so it is too soon to comment meaningfully on the effect of it. As I said earlier, we've committed to reviewing its impact after 12 months. We will do this in light of the practical experience of Scottish enforcement bodies and any new legislation in other administrations, and we will then consider whether any improvements need to be made to the approach that we have taken.
Question number 5, Liam Kerr.
Presiding Officer, to ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's position is on reforming the rules regarding the temporary release and parole of prisoners.
First Minister.
As we committed to in this year's programme for government, we will consult on measures to improve the openness and transparency of the parole system and how we can strengthen the voice of victims and their families in this process. The consultation will be published before the end of this year, and we will take action informed by the responses we receive. We also committed to ensure that victims and their families receive better information and greater support ahead of prison release arrangements, and these issues will be considered by the new Victims Task Force, which will hold its first meeting on the 12th of December.
Liam Kerr.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. Can I welcome the First Minister's partial commitments on parole reform, though whether this consultation translates into real action for victims and families is another matter. Michelle's law is also about strengthening victim and family rights before temporary release from prison is granted. It was the temporary release of Michelle Stewart's killer that kick-started the campaign. The SNP must deliver on Michelle's law. So will the First Minister commit today to expanding this consultation to cover temporary release?
First Minister.
Well, firstly, can I pay tribute again to the family of Michelle Stewart in their campaign, which I think is having a real impact on these issues. As the member, I know, understands, parole and temporary release are two entirely separate processes. We absolutely recognise the importance of strengthening the voice of victims and their families in both parole and temporary release. That's why we committed to action to improve both in the programme for government. That included a commitment to consult on measures to improve the openness of parole processes, and that consultation will seek views on how we can strengthen the voice and role of victims and their families, and it will cover the issues raised in the Michelle's Law proposal as they relate to parole. And as I said, the consultation will be published before the end of this year. Temporary release from prison is not controlled by the Parole Board, so that will not be part of this consultation. However, we are committed to improving the support and information available in relation to temporary prison release arrangements, and that's why that issue will be considered by the new Victims Task Force. And as I said a moment ago, that will meet for the first time on the 12th of December and will be co-chaired by the Justice Secretary and the Lord Advocate. So I hope that assures the member that both of these issues in these very different processes will be properly and fully considered.
Daniel Johnson.
Automatic release was introduced in 1993 by the Conservative government, and while early release is an important part of rehabilitation, it can lead to confusion about the time that will be spent by someone at the point of sentencing. So does the First Minister agree with me on the importance of transparency in sentencing in particular, but also with me that the scope and indeed resource available to the Sentencing Council must be reviewed, given that it's taken 3 years to publish 2 pages of guidance?
First Minister.
Well, can I thank Daniel Johnson for raising that question? Of course, as I know he also knows, early release is not the same as temporary release, but all of these issues will be looked at fully by the Victims Task Force, and it's because all of these issues will be included that the Lord Advocate is co-chairing that group. So I know there are a number of concerns around how these processes operate at the moment. They are all in place for good reasons, many of them to do with the rehabilitation of prisoners back into society, but it is also vital that there is appropriate and proper protection for the public and that the voice of victims and of victims' families is heard. So both on the consultation on parole arrangements, but also in the wider consideration of these issues by the Victims Task Force, the issue being raised by Daniel Johnson will receive proper consideration.
Thank you. Question 6, Colin Smith.
To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to reports that ScotRail has failed to fully deliver 29 franchise obligations.
First Minister.
Well, Colin Smith refers to committed obligations. What he doesn't mention is that of the 272 obligations in total, ScotRail has already delivered 128, with a further 115 on track for delivery by their due date. Of the remaining obligations, 14 are overdue, and we expect most of those to be achieved in 2019. 15 are categorised as having a challenging delivery date. Transport Scotland is working closely with ScotRail to ensure delivery of all committed obligations, which will deliver passenger benefits across the network. With a programme of this scale, it is normal for some delivery outcomes to change, but the focus when managing such changes is always the best interest of the passenger.
Colin Smith.
Well, it's disappointing the First Minister seems so dismissive of the fact ScotRail are not delivering important obligations. Clearly, improved journey times, integrated ticket and station investment, clearly not important to the First Minister. But it's not just on these 29 franchise obligations that ScotRail are failing. Punctuality has plummeted to a new low, with almost 1 in 5 trains running late. Passengers are sick and tired and deserve better. Well, so far, the First Minister's response has been to give ScotRail a free pass to breach their PPM benchmarks and to team up with the Tories to block Labour's plan to end this failing franchise. Well, can the First Minister tell us how bad does it have to get before she takes meaningful action? If the First Minister won't end this failing franchise, can she answer this straightforward question? Does the First Minister honestly believe that ScotRail will hit its 92.5% PPM target, yes or no? And if it's yes, when?
First Minister. Well, can I say to the member, I wasn't dismissive. I gave him the full facts on the question he was asking. I think probably some of those facts were inconvenient for the question that he wanted to follow up with, but that's not really my worry. On the 29 obligations, as I said, 14 listed as overdue. We expect most of these to be achieved in 2019. Of the 15 obligations where the delivery date is considered challenging, most have the potential to be achieved in the first part of 2019. In terms of wider issues with delays that he talks about, of course, we deeply regret any inconvenience to passengers. I think around half, sometimes more than half of all delays on the ScotRail network, of course, are the responsibility of Network Rail. As I've said many times in the past, Network Rail is not the responsibility of this Parliament. I look forward to getting the support of Labour members to make it the responsibility of this Parliament. But on that issue, I'm sure Colin Smith is aware that just this morning the Office of Road and Rail took formal action against Network Rail to deliver improved performance, and it also confirmed that ScotRail's performance in 2018-19 has been impacted by severe weather. So that lies behind many of the delays we've seen. We are working with ScotRail to improve performance so that the PPM target is met. Lastly, on the issue of the franchise, of course it's this government that for the first time, having won the powers that when Labour was in government at Westminster they refused to give this Parliament, it was this government that took action to ensure that there can be a public sector bid for the next franchise. But, you know, if Colin Smith wants us to go further, then again I invite Labour to join with us and to support a call for the full devolution of powers over rail, so that full nationalisation actually could be an option, because right now it's not, because Labour continues to block these powers coming to the Scottish Parliament.
Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister thinks that Network Rail are the fault of the majority of delays. What does the First Minister say to passengers that were on the Waverley to Helensburgh service on Monday that were left stuck at Uphall Station when their train decoupled, leaving 3 carriages behind, stranded at the station? Does the First Minister know why this incident happened? And can she assure the travelling public that nobody in Scotland will be left behind on Scotland's railways?
First Minister.
Well, the particular incident that the member raises, as I understand it, is currently being investigated by the ORR, and that is the appropriate action to take. It's not me claiming that half of the delays are down to Network Rail. It's a fact that half of the delays are down to Network Rail. And maybe if all of the members and all of the parties across the chamber could come together and actually demand the devolution of Network Rail, then we could have full and integrated responsibility and be able to do even more to improve performance on our railways. So I would be delighted to have the support of the Tories and of Labour to make that move.
Ross Greer.
Thank you. The latest ScotRail performance statistics show that on the Mulgai line, 3 in 4 trains are late or cancelled. Does the First Minister believe that ScotRail are fulfilling their obligations to passengers on a line where they can't get 3 out of every 4 trains reliably?
First Minister.
The Donovan review, which I'm sure the member is aware of, is looking at particular specific actions to deal with issues on that line. But of course, no, I don't think that's acceptable for passengers. That performance level is not acceptable, which is why we are working with ScotRail, and it's why we set stringent expectations of ScotRail to take the action that improves performance and improves the passenger experience.
Thank you very much. And that concludes First Minister's questions. We're going to move to members' business. Oh, point of order from Boris Curry. Point of order, please.
Last Thursday, in First Minister's questions, an SNP member in this chamber caused unnecessary concern over nuclear safety events at Faslane in respect to our UK submarine fleet by using political spin on the actual facts, producing an inaccurate
order, please. Let's hear the member.
Presiding officer, this causes alarm for our armed forces servicemen and women serving in the UK submarine fleet and keeping the UK safe as the fleet moves in total to Faslane. We hope their families will join them to live in Scotland, and we must support our UK submarine fleet crews and families and not make inaccurate statements in this chamber.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Corey. The point Mr. Corey makes is actually very similar to the one that I think Ms. Bailey made last week, which is it's a political point responding to another political opinion, which all members are allowed to express, but it's not a point of order. Thank you very much. We're going to move to members' business in the name of Tom Arthur on St Andrew's Day 2018, and we'll just have a short suspension while the gallery clears and the members and ministers change seats. A short suspension.
Thank you. Can I ask those members in the gallery who are still leaving to do so quietly, as the Parliament is still in session? I'm about to call the next order of business. The next item of business is a members' business debate on motion 14747 in the name of Tom Arthur on St Andrew's Day 2018, Make Someone's Day. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Can I ask those members who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now? And I call on Tom Arthur to open the debate. Mr Arthur, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's my great pleasure and privilege to lead this year's St Andrew's Day debate in our National Parliament. I would like to thank all those from across the Chamber who supported my motion, and to thank the Minister, Ben McPherson, for his engagement with members ahead of this debate in providing information on how the Scottish Government is supporting the celebration of St Andrew's Day across Scotland. Presiding Officer, today marks the 10th St Andrew's Day debate we have had since the Parliament reconvened in 1999. However, the first time we debated our National Day was in March 2004, and a members' debate secured by the late Donald Gorrie. As we approach the 20th anniversary of devolution, it is perhaps revealing of the Parliament's early years, but it took almost until the second year
of the second session to recognise St Andrew's Day in a parliamentary debate. Donald Gorrie was, of course, an independent-minded MSP who famously advised his Liberal Democrat colleagues to never say never to an independence referendum ahead of the 2007 elections. I'm sure my colleagues are grateful his colleagues didn't take his advice. Perhaps, therefore, it is an interesting coincidence of history that the first St Andrews debate on or around the day itself was led by Dennis Canavan, some 8 months after Mr Gorrie's. Presiding Officer, I think it is fair to say that no single Scottish politician of recent times has done as much as Dennis Canavan to promote participation in St Andrew's Day. His most enduring legacy in this area is, of course, the St Andrew's Day Bank Holiday Scotland Act 2007. However, he has also been a driving force in the St Andrew's Day Campaign Committee and is now Secretary to the cross-party group on St Andrew's Day, of which I am honoured to be convener. This is a group which rightly commands support from across the Chamber, and I would encourage members to engage with the group over the coming 12 months ahead of St Andrew's Day 2019. Presiding Officer, I also wish to recognise the contribution of both the Scottish Government and other colleagues who have secured St Andrew's Day debates over recent years. The record holder, if that is the appropriate term, is of course your colleague Linda Fabiani, who as a Government Minister led debates in 2007 and in 2008, a day almost exactly 10 years ago, in which there was also a debate on fishery negotiations with Europe. Some things never change. More recently, debates have been secured and led by Kevin Stewart, Annabel Ewing, Bruce Crawford and Michael Russell. These debates have generally been consensual and serve to remind us that we have more in common than that which divides us. They also serve as an opportunity to reaffirm our inclusive sense of Scottish identity. In a previous debate, it was you yourself, Presiding Officer, who framed it succinctly in stating that St Andrew's Day serves as a symbolic reminder that we are the Scottish people, whether or not we are born here. It is that inclusive spirit which is carried into this year's celebrations. Presiding Officer, the theme of St Andrew's Day 2018 is to make someone's day. This is a message that is not only relevant but also necessary. This year, our National Day falls at the end of a month in which children were tear-gassed by the world's only superpower, and our fellow EU citizens were described as queue jumpers. It falls in a year in which, in the man-made tragedy of Yemen, the largest documented outbreak of cholera in history continues. And it falls at a time of unprecedented wildfires, floods and extreme weather, which affirm we are on the brink of climate catastrophe. In an era of such darkening skies, a sense of fatalism and despair can become overpowering, which is eagerly exploited by those wishing to fan the flames of hate and intolerance. Therefore, it is at such times that simple acts of kindness, decency and humanity become essential. Every interaction we have with another human being is a small pebble dropped into the pool of our collective experience. We do not know how far the ripples will travel, but we each define in our own actions whether we send them with goodwill or malice intent. Communities, societies and nations are ultimately the sum of a complex web of relationships between individuals. It is the strength of each of these innumerable connecting threads that determines the health of the whole. By taking time to think of others, to make someone's day, we can each generate sparks of light that together will illuminate the darkened skies we currently face. In that spirit, I am very much looking forward to attending Barhead Menshed's 5th birthday party tomorrow and joining Lochwinnock Elderly Forum for the St Andrews Lunch, two groups who work to make someone's day all year long. Presiding Officer, this weekend we will once again celebrate Small Business Saturday, and I know I'm not the only member who will be sampling the produce of many of our small and independent traders as I visit Christmas fairs across my own constituency of Renfrewshire South. And this year's Small Business Saturday is particularly special, as for the first time we will also be celebrating St Andrew's Fair Saturday. The Fair Saturday movement originates from Bilbao in the Basque Country of northern Spain. It started in 2015 as a positive cultural response to the excessive consumerism of Black Friday. Since then, it has grown year on year, with the last year seeing events taking place in 114 cities, with over 140,000 artists and members of the public participating. These events generated almost €200,000 for local social causes. This year, I'm sure we will see further increases in participation, and I look forward to learning how communities across Scotland will embrace the Fair Saturday movement. I also look forward to seeing how these events complement many of our more established St Andrew's Day events, such as the work led by Beamish Scotland to celebrate our diversity, the famous St Andrew's Conga pioneered by Glasgow, the Caring City, and of course the St Andrew's Day debating tournament grand final taking place in this very chamber. Presiding Officer, St Andrew's Day offers a chance for all Scots, new and old, near and far, to come together and celebrate our unique contribution to the world, and to recommit ourselves to our values of fairness, equality and compassion. Some cynics may level a charge of Scottish exceptionalism. So in concluding, let me respond with this. As individuals, as communities, as a nation, our actions follow from our values, and only we can define our values. So, this St Andrew's Day, let us recommit to the values that we choose, and in doing so, make someone's day.
Thank you very much. I call Gillian Martin to be followed by Rachel Hamilton. Ms Martin, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I want to thank Tom Arthur for bringing this debate to the Chamber, highlighting St Andrew's Day. And I've always thought that we need to do more at home to celebrate Scotland's National Day. Because, of course, across the world, global Scots probably do more, actually, than we do at home to celebrate St Andrew's Day. And as I've been an expat on a number of occasions myself, I can understand that, because you do miss home. And I think you do make the most of the days like this to celebrate your Scottishness. But certainly friends and family that I know that have lived and worked around the world have been involved in organising and enjoying St Andrew's Day balls and events. Friends of mine who lived for a few years in Baku in Azerbaijan enjoyed many events like this, and I really much enjoyed looking at their photographs around this. And my own aunt and uncle were heavily involved in running the Singapore St Andrews Society Ball every year, and which looked a huge affair with pipers dancing and everyone in ball gowns and national dress. Yet, when we were at home, maybe not so much, and I wonder why that is. Perhaps if every local authority decided to implement a local holiday as voted on in this place in 2006, we might stand a better chance of St Andrew's Day becoming the special day that it should be, as it is in other countries. And of course there are exceptions though. My own party is a St Andrew's Day dinner hosted by Independence magazine the other week, and here in Edinburgh the day marks the start of the Winter Festival, and Visit Scotland has a list of amazing events happening throughout Scotland to celebrate St Andrew's Day. Yes, I will.
Alistair Allen.
I thank the member for giving way on the point that she rightly makes about the importance of local authorities being involved. She also agreed it would be helpful if all local authorities agreed to take the same day to celebrate, because not all do.
Gillian Martin.
Absolutely. If we want the impact of St Andrew's Day to be a real festival, which I think would be a terrific idea, then I think the coordination would be absolutely key to that. So, as Tom Arthur has mentioned, the theme of St Andrew's Day is Make Someone's Day, and I think that's a wonderful idea for the reasons that Tom Arthur has said. The smallest acts of kindness can have a huge impact on brightening someone's day, making someone feel better, the kind of pay-it-forward idea, which I really do love. My only regret about the toll on the bridge being stopped is that we used to pay it forward by paying the fare, the tariff of the car behind us, for two reasons, because it was a nice thing to do, but also used to freak people out. But anyway, I've tried to deliver an act of kindness by offering to close my office tomorrow so that my staff can have a day off on St Andrew's Day tomorrow. And I say try, they're actually quite resistant. They're a hard-working bunch who really take their responsibilities very seriously, like all constituency staff. I think that I might actually have to make my offer a demand to actually get them to commit to take that day off. Never like a gift horse in the mouth, guys. Please just take the day off. In the spirit of Tom Arthur's motion, I will be collecting food for the Inverary Food Bank at the local Tesco, as I do every year. It is an act of kindness and support that every one of the volunteers, though, wishes that we didn't have to do. But it does, every year, remind me of a particular, I'd say, a national trait that we can celebrate as well, and that is the generosity and fair-mindedness of Scots, and that's always in evidence in the donations that we get. I want to also pay tribute to the efforts of the 10 schools in my constituency who've come together to form a choir linking St Andrew's Day with the Fair Saturday that Tom Arthur has mentioned. They are performing a concert whose proceeds will go to the local St Andrew's School. Now, St Andrew's School, as many here will know, is a unique special school whose pupils range from 3 to 18 that have a range of barriers to learning. The school whose emblem is actually that, obviously, of our national flag, right appropriately is on the cusp of a very big change, moving from their present location to be part of the new Inverurie Community Campus. St Andrew's School will be housed in the new campus but will retain its singular identity and continue to provide the specialist environment and learning for all its pupils. It's testament to the high regard that the school has in the local community, whose pupils don't just come from Inverurie, they come as far as New Deer and Turriff, that the schools have chosen to make St Andrew's School's Day. I wish them all well, and I wish you all a happy St Andrew's Day when it comes. Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. Call Rachel Hamilton, followed by Mark Griffin, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Firstly, I'd like to thank Tom Arthur for bringing this debate to the Chamber today, and delighted to have the opportunity to participate. May I congratulate Gillian Martin and Tom Arthur on their very considered speeches. St Andrews is a fantastic opportunity to show off to the world what Scotland does best, whether it's our warm hospitality, rich culture and history. There are many events planned up and down the country to celebrate the day, and I welcome the initiative Fair Saturday, which was taken, as Tom Arthur said, as an idea from the British Council meeting in Bilbao in 2014. And Fair Saturday aims to mobilise people through social empathy rather than through commercialism, which is something that many of my constituents talk about. Black Friday being something that isn't very supportive to local high streets and communities. And this ties into making somebody's day, as we've all spoken about. I feel that on Fair Saturday, and beyond into the Christmas period, it is only right that we take a moment to see through commercialism and embrace the true meaning of celebration and Christmas, which is social inclusivity and good cheer. Closer to home in my own constituency, some 200 pupils from Hoyk, Denham and Newcastleton primary schools will be putting on their dancing shoes for a lively night of ceilidh dancing. And the event, which is held annually, is organised by local branches of the Royal Scottish Country Dancing Society. They have certainly been putting the pupils through their paces in the run-up to this event with 6 weeks of practice. So watch this space. Perhaps there'll be some competition on Strictly, Presiding Officer. I would like to thank all of those who organised the ceilidh and Morrison's for donating the juice and the snacks. And these sorts of events are fantastic at pulling our communities together and offering a chance for people to socialise and just have some fun for an evening. I believe that these events strike a chord with the campaign associated with St Andrew's Day celebrations. And if you're going to do anything on social media, please hashtag Make Someone's Day. The campaign encourages people to share just small acts of kindness. And in particular, I am of the opinion that many of the members across this chamber are that we should really be striving to do this every day. Whether it's popping in past to visit an elderly neighbour for a chat or volunteering for a local charity, the message from the campaign is a reminder that we should look out for one another, particularly as we are entering the darkest and coldest part of the winter. We should look out especially for our elderly neighbours. In my rural constituency, social isolation is a key problem, and with an ageing population, that is only just going to grow. And elderly people often can't travel around so easily, and they might not see anybody for months or on each day except for the local postman. And during these cold winter months, I would urge everybody to make sure that they check on their elderly neighbours and relatives at this time, even if it is just to say hello. And just to continue with that theme of loneliness, it affects people's mental and physical health too, and social isolation, as I've said in previous contributions in this chamber, it costs the National Health Service as much as £12,000 per a affected person, it can be as significant a risk factor for early death as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And whilst the Scottish Government taking steps to reduce social isolation, a lot more can be done. And I think these campaigns and the letter that I received from Ben McPherson can go in some way to helping the situation, and hopefully we all get involved. In closing, Presiding Officer, I want to wish everyone a happy St Andrew's Day and to take away an important message that small acts of kindness really can make somebody's day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I call Mark Griffin to be followed by Ruth Maguire. Mr Griffin, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today's debate celebrates the day of our patron St Andrew, and of course gives us the chance to celebrate our Scottish heritage. As Tom Arthur's motion says, tomorrow is an opportunity for people in Scotland across all faiths, cultures and origins to mark the contribution of Scotland at home and across the globe, and I'm thankful for his action in making sure we have this important debate today. Those of here will also know that this debate complements the establishment of a new cross-party group charged with promoting the celebration of St Andrew's Day. And of course, St Andrew is the national saint of countries including Bulgaria, Greece, Romania, Russia, Cyprus and Barbados, and I hope they too are gearing up for their own celebrations. He's also the patron saint of fishermen, fishmongers and rope makers, which is so very appropriate to Scotland given our seafaring heritage, and perhaps noteworthy given recent vigorous debate surrounding the common fisheries policy. But St Andrew's credentials as a saint of workers don't stop there. He's also the saint of textile workers, miners, butchers and farm workers. Perhaps then it's apt that for some of our public sector workers, at least tomorrow is a bank holiday in Scotland. Pursued by Dennis Canavan, we know legally the law allows someone to choose not to make payment on St Andrew's Day, a boon for small business and anyone budgeting ahead of Christmas. It is a good opportunity, as ever, for workers across Scotland to fulfil the theme Make Someone's Day. I hope, however, it's a starting point for our work on the cross-party group to encourage more organisations and businesses to take the day so that the people of Scotland will have the opportunity to take a rest and celebrate their national identity, their cultural diversity and their membership of the international community. And the impetus behind that is the same that is at the heart of UK Labour's plan for 4 new bank holidays on the patron saint days of the United Kingdom to celebrate and share in our national cultures and strengthen the bonds across these isles. Before I finish up, Presiding Officer, the motion says this year our celebration of Scotland's art and culture is for the first time being coordinated through Fair Saturday from Bowmore in North Berwick and Stromness to St Andrews, where people are celebrating to meeting to celebrate the National Day. Unfortunately for residents in my own region, the only event being held as part of Fair Saturday is in Falkirk, so clearly a bit of work for me over the next year to go back to the region and encourage more organisations, community groups and artists from Central Scotland to get involved or at least signed up for 2019. But for tomorrow, I hope that all Scots, born and bred, new or just simply visiting, get to enjoy the day, rest and immerse themselves in the day's history and our heritage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call Ruth Maguire to be followed by Peter Chapman. Ms Maguire, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Our National Day is a wonderful opportunity to promote Scotland as an inclusive and outward nation, and also to reaffirm to ourselves the very things that define our values as a nation. I'd like to thank my friend and colleague Tom Arthur for securing this debate and giving us all the opportunity to welcome the annual St Andrew's Day celebrations. As has been mentioned by colleagues, this year's St Andrew's Day theme is Make Someone's Day, imploring us to take a moment of time to perform a small act of kindness, perhaps to look in on an old friend, to spend a bit of time with a neighbour, or to support local volunteering that goes on in all of our constituencies. The cup of kindness is something that I'm proud to say overflows in abundance in my Ayrshire constituency, Cunningham South. In Stevenson, for example, the Henry family at Townhead Cafe will once again be providing Christmas dinner absolutely free of charge for any vulnerable, elderly or lonely people in the 3 towns and Kilwinning. And not a week goes by that our local newspapers don't carry stories of fundraising efforts for various worthy local charities. If Chamber will indulge me, I'd like to mention some of the local folk that have been doing good things. For example, Pauline Tremble is an Irvine-based artist who provided a series of paintings to raise funds for Whiteley's retreat in Ayr. Ellie Kennedy from Irvine raised an amazing £700 for the Beatson and for the Little Princess charity, which provides wigs to children who are going through cancer treatment. The Kilwinning Ambulance Depot raised £1,900 for the Brain Tumour charity by putting on an amazing fun day that many of the community took part in. And Birchie Hill Scouts managed to raise £300 for guide dogs for the blind. The new Kindness Rocks campaign is something that is being done by Irvine's Reverend Neil Urquhart and Father Willie Boyd. And they're coming together to further promote the message of kindness. They're working in association with North Ayrshire Kindness Innovation Network and the 2 Shoes brothers, as they're known. Give them a wee search on YouTube and you'll see their song and dance activities, are recording a song and promoting a video to promote kindness at home, in the workplace and across our communities on the run-up to Christmas across the constituency. As has been mentioned, this year will also see the launch of St Andrew's Fair Saturday, part of the global celebration of Fair Saturday, to provide a celebration of arts and culture and an opportunity for people of all faiths, beliefs, cultures and ethnic origins, as well as Scots internationally, to mark the contribution of Scotland at home and across the globe. The theme of kindness is again prevalent, with contributors asked to support a social cause and to promote the wider celebration of St Andrew's Day through their work. This Saturday, I'm lucky to be joining the very hard-working staff of Tesco in Irvine on their annual food bank collection. Now, St Andrew, of course, has an international profile, being not just the patron saint of Scotland, but also of Greece, Russia, Romania and Ukraine. So it's appropriate that we reaffirm Scotland's commitment as an open, welcoming and inclusive nation. Amidst the chaotic maelstrom of Brexit and what seems to be a terrible surge in racism and fascism, as Scots, we should continue to celebrate and aspire to embody our shared global values in respecting human dignity and human rights, freedom, democracy, equality and the rule of law. Just finished by wishing everyone a very happy St Andrew's Day, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. I'll call Peter Chapman to be followed by George Adam. Mr Adam will be the last speaker in the open debate. Mr Chapman, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I am pleased, like everyone else, to speak in today's debate, which celebrates Scottish culture, ethnic origin, heritage and inclusiveness. And I am also delighted that this year's theme is Make Someone's Day. Across this chamber we have heard stories from every member's different background and experience. And I would like to share some of my Doric culture with a poem by Mr George Dunbar. And this is a poem about a party held on St Andrew's night. And it's amazing the huge amount of food and drink that was consumed on the night. And hopefully it'll make at least some of your day. I've always said that there's some great poems written in the Doric. The best poems written in the Doric will stand comparison with anything written in the English language. Unfortunately, this is not one of them, but the reason I'm using it today is because it is focused on St Andrew's night. So there might be another occasion when I can actually give you some of the real quality stuff written in Doric. And mostly when I'm doing this, I do it from memory. I learn the poem, but unfortunately I haven't had time to learn this poem. But it's entitled St Andrew's Night. When ball St Andrew's Nacht come round, a corps forgathered at the town, to hear rant or lilt a tune, and team a jovial jorum. They supped kale and guid kale bros, whilk needs nae praise in rhyme or prose, till faces loud like reedest rose, or came o cockalorum. Comes Coca-Leaky, Gweedly Fairin, and Huddy's Sweet and Collar Heron. There was a nuch for a and sparing, as fests their thrapples store 'em. Sign come the haggis, het and reeking, its spicy guff, elk nose was seeking, and nae a tongue had room for speaking, till nippy swack did score 'em. The rosen breast of some fat knout, that aft among juicy gash did rout, the deal of een of them would flout, but scoufed what was afore 'em. Now sheep's head round the table creeps, along wi' busheled tatties, neeps, and hwang with their stuff in heaps, some winnert where they'd store 'em. We pheasant here and Patrick's there, stout mealy puddings and on to spare, you would have thought some had nae seer, sae hearty they did lour 'em. Neist rich plum duff and apple tart, and trummelin' tarns so sweetly sert, gart elke child pray to be spared, to form the happy quorum. Some knew made wide their teeth to pike, some cracked nelts and just sick like, while tongues were buzzing like a bike, we nothing knew to bore 'em. We sang and news the hours sped by, while pleasure beamed in ilky eye, and care gid wandering wi' a sigh, ayont all cairn gorem. A doch and Doris neen made out, was quaffed afore they dannert out, where shone the means sharp nibbit snoot, some swore they saw a score of 'em. And so we sang and heard some cheer, we all the acquaintance I said dear, they held St Andrew's Nacht this year, as others did afore 'em. And that's it, folks. I hope some of you, at least some of you, enjoyed it, and I hope some of you could understand it as well. I need little encouragement to speak a bit of Doric, and I rarely do an after-dinner speech without doing a poem or both a ballad. But just in closing, Deputy Presiding Officer, it is great to see such vibrant and varying Scottish culture in the Chamber today. While this debate has been a great opportunity to express and display our wide variety of culture and experiences of St Andrew's Day, I also want to touch on another part of our shared culture. And part of our shared culture, ladies and gentlemen, is our flag. The Saltire is the flag of Scotland. And ahead of St Andrew's Day tomorrow, I think it is important to get behind the Everyone's Flag campaign. It is not a flag belonging to one political party, one belief, or to push one agenda, or political persuasion. Presiding Officer, it is everyone's flag.
I'm just wondering, Mr Chapman, what the official report made of that. So I hope you've got it written out. I hope you've got an English translation for the bits. I followed bits of it. And it's wonderful to hear your Doric and your accent. I now call George Adam, then close it, and then to the Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm loving this debate. I'm loving the fact that we're all defining our very idea of our nation and the Scottishness of ourselves. And I'd like to thank my friend and colleague Tom Arthur for bringing this debate to the Chamber. I've been involved in this debate on numerous times in the past, and one of the things I always manage to do is what we're actually doing in Renfrewshire, what we're doing in Paisley with regards to St Andrew's Day, because in Paisley it's part of the winter events that we have, which start with the fantastic fireworks display, going on to the Christmas lights switching on, and then St Andrew's Day. Currently we have Paisley First, which is the Business Improvement District, actually having a winter festival in the town centre now. There is a massive big wheel right next to the Paisley Cross that has all the lights on and everything else. The London Eye has nothing on this big wheel in Paisley Cross. It's an incredible kind of event, and if we're going to be spending any time over this period, probably it will be there with the family. But for us, it's ensuring the legacy of the Paisley 2021 Year of Culture. And as Mark Griffin's already stated, St Andrew is the patron saint of textile workers, and if a town like Paisley cannot celebrate our patron saint, you know, then with our history in textiles, then there's absolutely no one else that can do it. But it's only right that Scotland's Parliament recognises our patron saint, because near the day that we celebrate St Andrew, over the years, I've looked at the Irish and the idea of St Patrick's Day with some envy, and I've looked at them as all over the world has celebrated their patron saint's day. And for us, I see it can be a missed opportunity to promote and tell the world what we are all about. And I know for a fact that the Scottish Government have been doing a lot of work on this. But I think we can still use these events and these days to promote ourselves some more, because the Scottish diaspora is equal, if not larger, than the Irish one. And St Andrew's Day can be another example of how we celebrate and promote all things special about Scotland. And on Friday, my own office will be taking the day off. So if I'm going to make anyone happy and make anyone's day, I've already done it with my members of staff, because they've got a 1 day off to actually to be able to rest up after supporting and helping the good people of Paisley over the past year. But I particularly like the theme of this year's St Andrew's Day celebration. The idea of using our patron saint's day as a means to make someone's day is a brilliant way to celebrate it. It shows that we continue to believe in our people and our communities. And as I've already said, my own staff will have that day off, and they promise to have a good day with that as well. But the whole point of the campaign is for us to make people's life that wee bit better. Whether that is ensuring our neighbours are okay, or visiting family and friends you haven't seen in a while. If everyone does one small thing, then together we can make a huge difference. Surely that is a fitting tribute to St Andrew. And as I previously said, it shows that what our priorities are. And as Paisley's MSP, my priorities have always been to the people I represent. It's always been about people that I try to make their lives better. And as an individual, my family are extremely important to me as well. But sometimes my daughter Jessica will complain that I sometimes get the two mixed up in my priorities, and I sometimes maybe spend more time helping the people of Paisley than dealing with my family and grandchildren. So perhaps for me, it might be a good day for me to make that time special to actually go and visit some of my family and friends and spend time with them. Because in closing, Presiding Officer, I would like to thank Tom Arthur again for bringing this debate to the Chamber. It's my belief that days like this are the ones that we can celebrate Scotland in its entirety, and this debate has shown that's exactly what we have done. Who we are and what we've done and where we're going, that for me is the importance of days like today or tomorrow. And I look forward to future years and to see how we can further promote this St Andrew's Day, how we can enjoy Scotland together, and how we can promote this to the world and tell everyone who exactly Scotland is.
Thank you. And I call on Ben McPherson to close for the Government Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And thank you so much to Tom Arthur for bringing today's debate, and to all members who've contributed for such thoughtful, passionate and enthusiastic speeches. And it's great to be in the Chamber with you all today as part of this important debate. The Scottish Government, Presiding Officer, is very proud to support our winter festivals with over £500,000, because our winter festivals boost Scotland's tourism and events sectors. However, as we have already heard today, they are certainly not all about finance. In fact, quite the opposite. From the unifying spirit of Hogmanay to the remarkable poetry of Robert Burns and others, from the global solidarity of Auld Lang Syne to building on this, on the 1st of November, I was delighted to launch the Scottish Government-led campaign to showcase Scotland's biggest ever celebration of St Andrew's Day. And on Friday, tomorrow, the 30th of November, Scotland is inviting people from near and far to join in the celebration of Scotland's National Day through coordinated partner activity and national and local events right across the country. And what's particularly exciting this year, as others have mentioned, is that for the first time the celebration of Scotland's National Day is linked to the global Fair Saturday initiative. Indeed, I understand we are the first Northern European country to join the Fair Saturday initiative, the second in Europe after founding country Spain, and the first country as a whole to commit to the initiative. This year we have up to 100 events celebrating St Andrew's Day between the 30th of November and the 3rd of December, which is 4 times the amount of last year. And between the 30th of November and the 3rd of December, which is 4 times the amount of last year and reaches into areas across the country, including key island communities with events in Skye and the Western Isles. Back to the Fair Saturday initiative, which is part of that, it was founded by Jordi Albareta, who's a really inspiring person, to promote and deliver positive social change. And reflecting the progressive and compassionate spirit of Fair Saturday, the common thread that connects all of Scotland's St Andrew's Day celebrations this year is a focus on marking our National Day by encouraging Scots far and wide to support others, by engaging in small acts of kindness to make someone's day. As others have said, whether it's helping a relative, friend, neighbour or stranger, or showing compassion where it's needed, whether it's contributing to a local cause or an international charity, or inviting friends and partners to mark the occasion together. Throughout Scotland this year, we're encouraging ourselves and each other to celebrate our National Day by looking outwards and positively engaging in kindness. The aim of all of this is not only to make a difference, but also to make Scotland's St Andrew's Day celebration something quite unique. By keeping local communities at the very heart of the celebrations, by reflecting our values and global reputation for fairness, by expressing the importance we place on the vital and integral role of our young people in our society, by celebrating the diversity of what modern Scotland is all about, and by working to strengthen the inclusive nature of the modern Scottish identity. This year, our St Andrew's Day celebrations will be the biggest yet, with so many different initiatives taking place, from a mass conga of school children to torchlight processions to multicultural events demonstrating the positive plurality of Scotland's sense of national and global citizenship. The multicultural celebration of Scotland's winter festivals delivered by Beamish Scotland has gone from strength to strength. And this year I am delighted that groups including the Polish Cultural Festival Association, Interfaith Association and St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, the Nepalese Himalayan Association Scotland in Aberdeen, the Ethnic Minority Forum in East Dunbartonshire and the Glad Cafe in Glasgow are all celebrating St Andrew's Day alongside their own unique heritage, faith and traditions. Presiding Officer, as I said at the beginning of my remarks, as Scotland marks our National Day this week, we do so looking outward, not inward. In these times of flux and challenge, it's important to emphasise, as others have in the Chamber, that Scotland's national identity is set within our internationalist ethos and traditions. Our sense of ourselves as Scots is, and long has been, bound up and intertwined with a long-held wider identity as a progressive European and global partner, and with our broad commitment to global citizenship. As it says in Tom Arthur's motion, this year, whether it's on St Andrew's Day tomorrow or on Fair Saturday, coupled with commitments to to Small Business Saturday, tomorrow and on Saturday, we have the opportunity for people in Scotland of all faiths, beliefs, cultures and ethnic origins, and Scots internationally, to mark the contribution of Scotland at home and across the globe. Whatever you are doing, to members and everyone across Scotland, have a very happy St Andrew's Day. Thank you for being part of this wider commitment to make someone's day, because together, through kindness, community and fairness, we can make an important difference and demonstrate to the world, ourselves and each other, the very best of what it means to be Scottish.
Thank you. That concludes the debate, and I suspend this meeting of Parliament until 2:30.
It's lovely to be out on such a sunny evening in Edinburgh, but it's a shame that we have to be out tonight protesting against the two-child cap and the rate clause, well more than a year since Alison Thulis, my colleague at Westminster, first spotted it in the small print of a Tory budget.
Very glad to see such a huge demonstration today and so many people still coming along 1 year after the rate clause came into force to show their opposition to this vile and despicable policy. The UK government have never been able to justify this policy, and we saw that this week with Esther McVeigh's pathetic attempts to say that the rate clause was somehow double support for women and that gives them some kind of chance to talk about the most appalling and disturbing experience of their life.
As you can see behind me, we're at the very beginning of the All Under One Banner rally. You can obviously hear the pipers behind me as events are about to kick off.
It's time to aim high, look resolutely outwards, and never, ever accept second best. Above all, it's time to believe that we can. We can build that better country we know is possible. And friends, we will.
If you enjoy watching our programmes, please help us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster by signing up to become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter.